When a narcissist reaches out after silence. Imagine this for a moment. After weeks, maybe even months of complete silence, your phone suddenly lights up. A single notification appears on the screen, one short message, one familiar name. The same person who once left you emotionally exhausted now suddenly seems interested in stepping back into your world. Before you answer, before your emotions start making decisions for you, there is something you need to understand clearly. Their message may not be as random as it looks. Their return may not be accidental. And the way you respond right now can change the entire direction of what happens next. This is the part many people overlook, so stay with me. Because what happens after that first message can reveal more than the message itself. If you have ever experienced someone disappearing from your life and then suddenly returning as if nothing happened, pay close attention. Understanding this moment could save you from months or even years of emotional confusion, false hope, and repeated pain. When a person like this finally reaches out after a long silence, the first thing you should recognize is simple. They may not be coming back because they suddenly discovered your worth. They may not be reaching out because they gained deep emotional understanding or suddenly developed real regret. And they certainly did not become a completely different person overnight. In many situations, this kind of return happens because they want something from the connection. What they want can be emotional supply. And emotional supply can appear in many forms. It can be your attention, your validation, your admiration, your sympathy, your curiosity, your concern, or even the comfort of knowing that they can still reach you whenever they want. Their silence was not necessarily an act of giving you peace, and their return is not automatically evidence of growth, healing, or genuine care. Their behavior may be connected more to what they need internally than to what is actually good for your emotional well-being. People who behave this way often repeat the same emotional pattern again and again. Distance becomes part of the cycle, silence becomes part of the cycle. Then, after enough time passes, they begin looking back toward people they once affected emotionally. Maybe another source of attention has disappeared. Maybe their current situation no longer feels exciting. Maybe someone else stopped giving them the reaction they expected. Or maybe they simply want to know whether they still have access to you. Whatever the reason, they may start checking the doors they previously left open. This is why their message can feel so strange and so perfectly timed. It may arrive at midnight. It may appear on a random afternoon. It may come right when you are finally beginning to feel peaceful again. Sometimes it happens after you've stopped checking their profile, stopped thinking about what they are doing, and finally started putting your attention back on yourself. Suddenly, there they are again. One message, one question, one casual greeting, and instantly old emotions can rise to the surface. You may wonder, why now? You may start remembering the good moments. You may begin asking yourself whether they finally understand what they lost. But slow down. This is where you need to protect your clarity. Their timing does not automatically prove their intentions are healthy. Some people are highly sensitive to changes in attention and emotional attachment. They notice when your focus moves away from them. They notice when your energy is no longer centered around the relationship. Not necessarily because they understand you deeply, but because they recognize that their influence may be weakening. And when that happens, they may reach out to see whether the connection is still available. This is one of the most important parts to understand, so do not miss it. They may not be missing you as a whole person. They may be missing what they receive through you. They may miss your attention. They may miss your reassurance. They may miss the way you listened. They may miss the emotional reaction they could create inside you. They may miss knowing that one message from them could change your entire mood. They may miss the sense of influence they once had over your emotions. That is why their return can feel confusing. Their words might sound caring while their behavior tells a different story. They might say, "I was thinking about you." They might ask how you have been. They might suddenly remember an old memory from the beginning of the relationship. They may even act warm, familiar, and completely comfortable, almost as if the painful period between you never existed. But remember this, familiarity is not the same thing as change. A familiar voice can still come from the same emotional pattern. A sweet message does not automatically erase previous behavior, and an apology does not mean much if there is no real accountability behind it. What you need to watch is not simply what they say. Watch what happens after you respond. Do they respect your boundaries? Do they take responsibility? Do they acknowledge the pain they cause without making excuses? Do they show consistency instead of disappearing again? These questions matter far more than the first message, because sometimes the first message is simply a test. They want to know whether the door is still open. They want to see whether you will respond emotionally. They may be checking whether they still have access to your attention. And this is where your response becomes powerful. If you immediately give them the same emotional access they once had, the old cycle can restart before you even realize what is happening. You might find yourself explaining yourself again, defending your feelings again, waiting for replies again, and analyzing every little word again. And suddenly the peace you worked so hard to build begins slipping away. So before you answer, pause, take a breath. Ask yourself what has actually changed. Not what you hope has changed, not what their message makes you imagine. What has truly changed? Because your emotional reaction has value whether you realize it or not. If you respond with anger, they may still receive the attention they were looking for. If you respond with excitement, they receive even more reassurance that the connection remains alive. If you respond with sadness, questions, or long explanations, they may still learn that they can affect you. Even a short, cold response can sometimes communicate that the emotional door is not completely closed. This does not mean you must become cruel, bitter, or emotionally unavailable. It means you should become intentional. There is a major difference between reacting and responding. Reaction happens quickly. Response happens with awareness. And when someone returns after months of silence, awareness becomes your protection. You do not have to prove that you are over them. You do not have to punish them. You do not have to explain your entire healing journey. And you certainly do not have to give immediate access simply because they decided to knock on the door again. Remember, a message is only a message. It is not proof of transformation. It is not proof of regret. It is not proof that they suddenly understand your value. The evidence comes later through consistent actions, respect, accountability, and behavior that remains healthy even when they are not getting what they want. This is where many people make the mistake of looking at the return itself instead of looking at the pattern behind the return. So if you are in this exact situation right now, do not let one notification pull you back into an entire emotional history. Read the message, take your time, observe, and most importantly, remember who you became while they were gone. That version of you deserves protection too. And if you want to understand what their next move may reveal, keep watching, because the behavior that comes after the first message can tell you far more than the message itself ever could. This is why they often come back when they feel that emotional currency starting to slip away from them. Their earlier silence can fit into the same repeating pattern. When they disappear, their attention may have moved somewhere else. Perhaps another source of validation became more exciting. Perhaps they became occupied with their own life. Or perhaps the silence itself was being used to create uncertainty and regain a sense of control. Whatever the reason may be, that silence often serves their needs in some way. And when staying silent no longer gives them what they want, they suddenly return. Their timing may not be as random as it appears. They might contact you when you are feeling emotionally sensitive, around an important date, or exactly when your confidence is beginning to return. People who behave this way can become uncomfortable when they sense that their psychological influence over someone is disappearing. They may notice that you are no longer checking for them, waiting for them, or reacting the way you once did. So when they appear again, the motivation may have more to do with their own needs than with emotional responsibility or a sincere desire to rebuild something healthy. This is where many people get confused because the message itself may look completely harmless. It might sound kind. It might sound gentle. It might even contain what appears to be an apology. But do not focus only on the words sitting on the screen. Look deeper at what may be happening underneath them. When someone reaches out after a long period of silence, the contact is often intentional. They may be choosing their words carefully because they want a response. They are watching to see what happens next. Do you still care? Do you still react? Are you still emotionally reachable? These are the questions hidden behind many simple messages. So keep watching, because this small detail can change the way you understand their return. A simple "hey" or "how are you" can sometimes function as a test to discover whether you will carry the emotional responsibility of reopening the conversation. A nostalgic message can bring old memories to the surface and reveal whether those memories still have power over you. A vulnerable statement such as, "I needed to talk to you," may test whether you are still willing to place their emotional needs above your own boundaries. That is why seemingly ordinary words can carry much more weight than they appear to have. People who repeat these patterns can remember emotional reactions surprisingly well. Over time, they learn your responses. They learn what made you soften. They learn what caused you to feel guilty. They learn what made you explain yourself. They learn what kept you engaged even when you were already exhausted. They may remember what made you chase answers, seek closure, or reopen conversations after deciding to step away. In this sense, the message can become a tool for gathering information. The purpose may not always be genuine reconnection. Sometimes the purpose is simply to find out what emotional access still exists. They want to know whether you are still affected. They want to know whether you still think about them. They may want to know whether the silence hurt you. They may even want to discover whether the door is still unlocked. And here is something important. Even your hesitation can communicate information. An immediate answer can suggest that you are still emotionally available. A long emotional explanation can reveal that the attachment is still active. Even anger can show that the person still carries emotional importance inside your world. Every reaction says something. This is why you should never underestimate a simple message from someone who has a history of creating emotional confusion. Those messages can contain several emotional layers at once. The words may appear simple, but underneath them they can reopen old roles and familiar patterns. They might mention a memory you shared. They might suddenly speak in the same warm style they used during the early days. They might become unusually caring, gentle, or nostalgic. But warmth by itself is not proof of emotional maturity. Nostalgia is not proof of transformation. Familiar language does not automatically mean genuine emotional depth. Sometimes these things simply activate familiarity and attachment. They remind you of who you were with them before the painful parts became impossible to ignore. And once those old feelings are activated, it becomes easier to respond from emotion instead of from clarity. In many cases, the silence ends when the person feels that they need something again. Maybe they want attention. Maybe they want reassurance. Maybe they want validation. Maybe they simply want to know whether emotional access is still available. Their first message can be the opening move in that test. What may matter most is not how deeply you feel about them, but whether they can still affect what you feel. That is one reason their return can feel so confusing. One moment the message sounds caring. The next moment the communication becomes distant. Then it becomes inconsistent, unclear, or subtly pressuring. The focus can shift quickly depending on the reaction they receive. Their communication may revolve more around their needs than around honest emotional accountability. Once you recognize this pattern, the entire situation starts looking different. You stop asking only, "Why did they come back?" and begin asking the more useful question, "What happens when I do not give them the reaction they expected?" Stay with that question because it can reveal more than their opening message ever will. When someone with this kind of behavioral pattern reaches out after silence, your first response can become extremely important. They may pay close attention to emotional reactions. They notice patterns, they notice timing, they notice tone, they notice hesitation, vulnerability, and small openings in your communication. Your first reply may reveal much more than you realize. Whether your answer is long or short, emotional or neutral, immediate or delayed, it can all be interpreted through the history between you. If you answer instantly, they may assume you are still emotionally reachable. If you respond with anger, they may still see emotional involvement. If you answer with sadness or openness, they may recognize an opportunity to shape the emotional direction of the conversation. Even a neutral response can reveal something if it contains long explanations, emotional details, or an invitation to continue. This is also why unexpected timing can be so powerful. They understand that sudden reappearance can activate emotional reflexes before logical thinking has time to catch up. A familiar name can bring back memories within seconds. Loneliness can speak quickly. Hope can speak quickly. Pain can speak quickly. Confusion can speak even faster. And if your emotional reflex responds before your boundaries do, the old dynamic can begin again almost immediately. This is the moment where you need to slow everything down. You do not have to respond just because they reached out. You do not have to explain your feelings. You do not have to prove that you have moved on. Your pause is allowed. Your silence is allowed. Your boundaries are allowed. And remember this next part because it is one of the biggest clues to watch. They often respond more strongly to your behavior than to your words. You can tell someone, I am completely done, but if your behavior still shows strong emotional reactions, they may interpret the situation differently. Words can say one thing while behavior communicates another. Your reaction can influence what they try next. If you sound deeply hurt, they may move into a sympathetic role. If you sound angry, they may present themselves as misunderstood, attacked, or unfairly judged. If you sound hopeful, they may offer warmth, affection, or encouraging words to keep the emotional door open. And if you sound guilty, they may increase pressure, persistence, or emotional demands. This is why your first response matters so much. It is not about playing games. It is not about manipulating them back. It is about protecting your own emotional clarity. You are not responsible for proving anything to someone who has already shown you a pattern of disappearing and returning. Before you answer, ask yourself what evidence you actually have. Has their behavior changed consistently? Have they taken responsibility without excuses? Have they respected your boundaries when you said no? Have they shown patience instead of pushing for immediate emotional access? These questions are more valuable than the emotional rush created by seeing their name appear on your screen. And if you have been waiting for the clearest sign of what their return really means, watch what happens when you do not give them the reaction they expected. That moment often reveals the real purpose behind the contact. The message may begin the conversation, but your response can reveal the pattern. In many ways, your emotional reaction can become their measuring point. This is exactly why staying emotionally calm matters so much. A steady and neutral response can interrupt the pattern they expected. A delayed answer, a controlled tone, or even no response at all can create uncertainty. And uncertainty can be difficult for someone who is used to feeling that they can predict or influence your emotions. When the expected emotional reaction does not appear, the old script suddenly stops working. There is no anger to pull from you, or no long explanation, no emotional reassurance, no immediate attention. The reaction they may have expected simply is not there. At that moment, their confidence about emotional access can begin to weaken. This does not mean you are trying to punish anyone. It means you are no longer automatically participating in the same emotional pattern. When people with this kind of behavior return after a long silence, notice the tone they choose. They usually do not begin with open aggression. Instead, they often approach through familiarity, warmth, memories, concern, or emotional softness. The opening may sound harmless. It may even feel comforting. But that approach can lower your emotional defenses quickly. Suddenly, they may appear thoughtful, caring, reflective, or unusually vulnerable. They may say they are struggling. They may describe themselves as confused, lonely, overwhelmed, stressed, or emotionally exhausted. Different approaches can serve the same basic purpose. They can make you lower your guard before the deeper conversation begins. So keep this in mind, because the first tone they use may tell you more than the actual words. Softness can make you temporarily forget the pain created by previous distance. Emotional vulnerability can awaken your empathy, and empathy is powerful. When you care about someone, seeing them appear hurt can make you want to help, even when helping them means ignoring your own boundaries. In some situations, what looks like vulnerability may not represent the full emotional truth. It may also function as a way to influence the direction of the conversation. This is why emotional distance can become so valuable. When time passes and space grows between you and another person, the emotional noise often becomes quieter. You begin thinking more clearly. The intensity starts to fade. Your confidence slowly comes back. You can look at the past without being pulled into every emotion connected to it. And while that distance is giving you clarity, someone who is used to having emotional influence may notice that the connection is weakening. When they sense that your attention is moving away, their communication style may change. They may suddenly sound more understanding, more patient, more thoughtful, more open, more emotionally aware. That change can create serious inner conflict. You may begin wondering, have they finally changed? You may ask yourself whether this time could be different. You may remember the person you wanted them to become and confuse that image with what is actually happening now. But do not miss this distinction. Temporary softness is not the same as lasting transformation. Real emotional growth does not appear only when someone fears losing access. It shows itself consistently, even when there is nothing to gain. That is the difference between a moment of warmth and a genuine change in behavior. Their emotional warmth can become stronger when they feel that the connection is slipping away. Their vulnerability may become deeper when they want reassurance. Or their openness may suddenly appear when they realize you are creating distance. This is why some messages can feel strangely personal. It may seem as if they remember exactly what once touched your emotions. And sometimes they do remember. They may remember what made you soften your boundaries. They may remember what made you forgive quickly. They may remember what made you stay in conversations longer than you wanted. They may remember the words that once gave you hope. They may remember the emotional language that made you feel connected. The important question is not whether they remember. The question is what they do with that knowledge. Sometimes it can be used to rebuild something healthy. Other times it can be used to regain emotional access. That is why you should look at patterns instead of getting carried away by one emotional moment. The warmth may feel personal, but the purpose may simply be re-engagement. Many people fall back into old cycles because they mistake temporary emotional softness for permanent change. They hear the right words. They feel the old connection. They remember the good moments, and before they know it, the same cycle begins again. But patterns eventually reveal what words hide. This is where your next decision becomes important. If you do not respond after someone returns, a very different process can begin. Silence interrupts the emotional system that once connected their behavior to your reaction. And this next part is important, so stay with me. People who depend heavily on emotional reactions often use both positive and negative responses as information. Anger tells them something, sadness tells them something, long explanations tell them something, longing tells them something. Even emotional confusion can tell them that the connection still has power. But silence provides very little feedback. There is nothing for them to analyze, no emotional argument to continue, no reassurance to collect, no explanation to challenge. The usual emotional loop is interrupted. That absence of feedback can create uncertainty because the response they expected is missing. But choosing not to respond is not about proving that you're stronger. It is not about trying to make someone suffer. It is about deciding where your emotional energy goes. In many situations, silence can become a powerful boundary because it does not feed an unhealthy cycle. It communicates something without needing a long explanation. Your emotional energy is no longer automatically being directed toward that person. Your peace is no longer dependent on whether they appear or disappear. And that shift can be incredibly powerful. Of course, silence is not always necessary in every situation. Sometimes a clear boundary or brief response is more appropriate. The point is that you are allowed to choose the response that protects your well-being instead of reacting from pressure. And when you choose silence, you create room to observe rather than react. That space matters. Even a small interaction can reopen old confusion. One polite answer can turn into another conversation. One conversation can become daily communication. Daily communication can slowly rebuild the same emotional cycle you worked hard to leave behind. This is why creating space can protect your clarity. Silence gives your mind room to settle. It allows emotional intensity to decrease without new stimulation. It gives you time to notice what you actually feel instead of responding to what someone else wants you to feel. It can protect your emotional stability from unnecessary turbulence. Most importantly, a boundary does not always require a long explanation. You are not obligated to give emotional access simply because someone suddenly decides to return. You are not required to answer every message. You are not required to reopen a door just because someone knocks again. And this is something many people need to hear. Protecting your peace is not cruelty. It is self-respect. What makes silence especially interesting is that different people can interpret it in completely different ways. A balanced person may see silence as space. They may understand it as closure, distance, or simple disinterest. They may respect it and move forward. But someone who is strongly focused on emotional influence may interpret the same silence differently. Instead of seeing it as your boundary, they may experience it as a loss of access. And when that happens, they may try a different approach. They might send another message. They might change their tone. They might suddenly become extra caring. They might bring up an old memory. They might ask why you are ignoring them. They may even become more persistent. The important thing is not to let their increased effort automatically convince you that their intentions have changed. Increased contact is not the same as increased emotional maturity. More messages do not automatically mean more love. Stronger emotions do not automatically mean healthier intentions. Sometimes increased pressure simply means the previous approach did not produce the reaction they wanted. And if you recognize that, you can stop reacting to every new attempt and start watching the pattern instead. That is where your real clarity begins.